So thank you everyone for joining us for the third and final breakout rooms. I know this is Cindy's third too, so we're lucky we're going to get to hear her today. Before we get started though, I would like to acknowledge that we are joining from Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of Mi'kmaq people. And we know there are people joining us from outside of Mi'kmaq, so please share where you are currently joining us from. So without further ado, I will introduce Cindy Tai. So Cindy is a former national team member and all-Canadian soccer player graduating from Acadia as an academic all-Canadian. After graduating, Cindy was a math and physical education teacher for 20 years. She now devotes her time to coaching and parenting. Her coaching resume includes assistant coach of the U17 National Soccer Team, head coach of U15 National Soccer Team, assistant coach of Canada's U20 team, and Nova Scotia Canada Games coach in 2009, 2013, and 2017. Cindy is currently the head coach Dalhousie Tiger Women's Soccer and the high performance manager at Dalhousie. So thank you so much, Cindy, and we'll get you to take it away from here.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty, and thanks everybody. I know it's a beautiful day out there, and just the organization of the conference and the engagement has been awesome. So I've really enjoyed it. And this is the third session and a little bit smaller than the other groups, which I think is really cool. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more engagement from you guys and less on me. But Kirsty, if I could just, I think, share. Yeah, you got it. I got it. Perfect. So the topic today is empowering emerging leaders, and very close to my heart is helping other people be better. And us as coaches, I'm sure definitely that is the motivator or the driver of what we do every day. I find this topic very interesting. I've done a lot of training in leadership and working with young people, both as a teacher, but more deliberately in other settings. Some camp settings and some sports settings, and just learning more and more, especially in the evolution of social media and next generations and what that looks like for them. So my passion is definitely around this. And when I first came to Dalhousie, I was accustomed to working with athletes that were, anywhere from 12 to 18 years old. And I made some assumptions when I came to the university environment that they would be set in some of their leadership skills and what they could do. And I was, the assumption that I made helped me learn that was not the case, and take me a couple years actually to work through that. And these last couple years for me has definitely been trying to impact them more, to empower them to find their voice and to do things for themselves, and not necessarily always relying on, whether a head coach or assistant coach, doing things within their team and outside their team in the community, so they can gain confidence. And honestly, we do so much as head coaches and take so much on that releasing the reins, I think, is hard for some of us sometimes, but doing that has definitely helped take some things off me, and it's helped them grow. So I'm just going to share a little bit about that and ask for your input along the way on how I started with my team. So I think one of the first things I had to do when I was starting on this within my team was I had to understand what I felt, the definition of leadership was. Like, what was most important to me? And it's very broad, I know. So I'm curious, and I'd love you to share. You can share in the chat box or verbally. What is your definition of leadership, whether it's a couple words or a sentence, and then we'll go from there. So chat box, or you can put your hand up and go for it.
Cindy, I just put, this is Lance.
Yep.
I just say empowering members, or empowering your team to follow.
So what do you mean by that, Lance, to empowering them to follow?
Well, just using your leadership style to have that buy-in, that sense of ownership, that those people might feel like they're part of part of the process and contributing to the outcome.
Right. So they're definitely in it with you, not necessarily you're not pushing or pulling them. They're
It's a
right
team effort.
alongside you. Yeah, very good. There's some great ones in here. Kirsty and I actually played with Kirsty's mom and her aunt, and had her granddad coached me way back, so we have a lot of connections there. But empowering, motivating, inspiring, D's doing little things to make every day to make people around you better. That's great. Lead by example, potentially fail. Oh yeah, the fail word. We talk about that around our house quite a bit. It's just such negative connotations, and I'm just like, show me somebody that's never failed, like each and every day on something and what they're doing, and just have to make it part of the process. Motivating and moving towards a common goal. So these are great. I mean, it's so broad, and I think depending on your experience and where you're coming from in the background and who impacted you and how they did it is definitely plays a role in all this. So there's a couple definitions for me, and this one I've always been taught to from a young age. My dad was a teacher and a coach, and very involved. So I was always taught to leave things in a better place to make those around you better than before they arrive. So, if you have that broad scope of, if you come into something, whether it's a job or, a team, that wherever their starting point is, that when they leave or when you leave, that it looks a little bit better and stronger. And that definitely means the people in there, they feel like they've improved. I mean, and if you think of that in youth sport or, any sport, what I want for my kids is when they enter into something, a team, that they come out better than when they came in. And they want that too. They want that improvement, and to be able to see that and feel it. And that has a lot to do with the leadership that's in front of them. So those are great. Another one that I really like is just, and I guess it goes to Lance's point, being able to influence people to be the best version of themselves. And when you think of the word influence and how you do that and how you go about that, there's so many different avenues, but just finding that way where they can feel like they're part of it and want to get better and want to take on more on their own. Because ultimately, if you've done a good job, this starts to happen, and which is really very gratifying when you let go of the reins a little bit, or when you're just observing and looking out, and you see whatever one of your kids, whether it's putting away the gear or bringing out the gear or helping a young player, or connecting with somebody tactically, even, like, there's just so many different moments that you can observe and look out and go, you know what, they're not reliant on me. I'm not the only voice here, or my staff, that they're helping each other. So when you see that, that's a pretty exciting feeling. One of the things I'm going to ask, I'm curious about, because I know the challenges that I had when I first came into this environment, and I started to dig into the leadership skills on what is it that they're missing. But with this generation, I find that they are very, like, they're great kids, and they work hard, and they do all those things, and they're just nice kids for the most part, the ones that I work with. But there's always some gaps, and I'm curious to hear about what you think some of the gaps are with some of the student athletes or athletes that you're working with in terms of leadership. Where are there gaps? And feel free to just jump in and share. Yeah, always comes up, Amanda, that always comes up. Holding each other to account.
Yeah, D here. I think there's kind of two big ones. One that I see is initiative. So sometimes they're just waiting for us to tell them. And then, on that piece too is right, those difficult conversations.
Yeah, I love, that's the first time, D, I've heard that one in this session. But I love it. You're right. They're waiting for someone else to take a step.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and definitely holding to account for sure. I'm not sure where that comes from. I don't have enough research on that, but I know when I came up through, there was definitely no issue on holding others to account. I grew up with a group of teammates that would, in no uncertain terms, tell you when things weren't going well, and give you a little bit of a kick, but also people that had your back as well. But it definitely, the communication has changed quite a bit on what they react to. And so we'll dig in. I'm curious to hear more about your experiences and what that looks like in terms of how do we do that and help them hold each other to account. I'll share a little bit on my journey on how I'm getting there. I am not quite there yet with the group I'm with, but I'm definitely getting closer. The conversation is happening right now. Okay, so one of the first things I do, so one of the journeys I've been on with them is trying to build them into leaders at Dal, and when I'm away with the national teams as well, because we have a very short time frame with those teams, but really, getting out of the gate quickly and establishing that trust. But one of the things that I've done with our kids is I met with them at the beginning of the year as a group, and then met with them individually. And there's a couple kids in particular that were asking for more leadership and more responsibility and wanted more of a role. And there was one particular student athlete that was had a lot of potential in terms of being a leader. And when I say that, is more traditional, like very vocal and not afraid to take that initiative, like Dee said. So a bit, she scared people a little bit because she was pretty vocal and out there, and they weren't sure how to respond to her. But she had some work to do. So anyway, we sat down and I gave her this quote, and it was more, I said, you know what, before you can take on more of that, you need to be able to lead yourself first. And I left her with that because there were some gaps that she had to fill. And I also didn't want it to be a conversation where I was shooting her down because of what she was trying to do. But I wanted to raise her self-awareness to say, if we're going to create leaders and if we're going to be leaders ourselves, we have to be able to do it ourselves, take care of ourselves and do all of the little things that we're asking of them. So helping them realize they lead themselves first and understand what that means was very important. She went away and a week later we reconnected, and I asked her, I said, what do you think? And she sort of had a smile. She's like, I didn't understand at first, like when that came out. And she goes, I was a bit pissed off because she felt it was a bit of a shot, and that's not what it was meant for. I said, the learning was meant for you to take some time to reflect and then come back and we'll talk about it. And then let's work towards some of those things that you need to be better at in order to take on more leadership. So it was interesting. I think when you talk about that accountability thing and having those conversations, safe environments, that you can ignite a conversation like that and then have somebody give them the time to walk away from it and then reconnect with them. Like, so I'm still here with you, and I believe in you and I'm going to help you, but we definitely need to close in on this. So it was a bit risky for me because I wasn't sure how she was going to take it, but it did turn out well, and she improved quite a bit over the year in that. Along with that, so that was like an individual thing we've done. Our athletic department 2 years ago now did a session with a professor, it's Carrie Din from Calgary, who does a lot of work in leadership. And one of the things that she did actually with our whole group and coaching staff included was ask these 3 questions and asked us to write down what great leadership looks like, sounds like, feels like. So we did that together, which was super powerful, getting from their perspective what it looks, sounds, and feels like. And then I did it with my team as well. So actually, I'm going to get you guys to do it right now, and you can put it in the chat. And again, you can talk about it as well as you go. But I think getting from their perspective, learning what they think it is important because their experiences will definitely be different than ours have been. So put it in the chat what you think it looks like, sounds like, feels like, and if you'd like to share otherwise, don't be afraid to jump in. Anybody willing to share anything on, let's start with what it looks like. What does it look like? Barack Obama, I agree with that. Why do you say that? Who said that, Stephen? And when I see a name there like Barack, and Stephen says that, and then I look underneath and see positive, encouraging, feels empowering from Lance, and empowered, shared responsibility, working towards a shared vision. That's what it looks like. And sounds like, what does it sound like if you were hovering above or an observer on the side? Yeah, it's a big word in there, Stephen. Empathetic, the vision, confidence. Some great ones here too, that from Donna: attentive, interested, aware, informed. Feels comfortable, caring, positive, sounds suggestive, calm, and encouraging. Haven't seen the suggestive one yet. I like that. Sounds like great questions, encouragement, appreciation, recognition. Sounds productive. I think sometimes we get nailed for being cheerleaders. Sometimes there's a place for that, affirmation and, way to go and all that. And that's needed, and when it's needed and who you're saying it to and how often. And there's other ways as well. When you look at that, sounds productive. Be more specific. So when you look at these, when you do this, when I did this with my team, it was interesting because they're very similar in terms of they would think of someone and bring out those qualities. And as you look at all of these words about what great leadership looks like, sounds like, feels like, there's nowhere in there, or very rarely, is it a performance or the best. And I think sometimes the kids will equate, a leader is your best player, and they very well may be, just by example, but they also may not be at all. So when you look at all these, I think, and you have that discussion with your athletes and looking at all these words and going, you're like what is consistent in here for us? What are these words saying? And when you look at the positive, encouraging, motivating, communication, asking question, feels cared for, free to fail for sure, and curious. These are all things that are big, big things that everybody has the ability to move towards. And some are, better at certain things than others, for sure. When we went through this exercise and came to that, there was a lot of aha moments, sort of, oh yeah, it's not necessarily you know, the best athlete or the one that's the loudest, or you know, whether it's encouraging or, you know, giving some critical feedback. That's not necessarily what it looks like. You can definitely have that performance leader, no question, but the underlying message to everybody was we all have a responsibility, because all of these things we can try and move towards, and some are stronger than others. So that was a real powerful part for us, because understand that everybody plays a role in the leadership in the team, and everybody has that ability. I think definitely empowered them to move a little bit further and think of themselves a little bit different. Because if you're a kid that we talked about it yesterday on one of the session yesterday, somebody said, I have a kid that's just does everything that, you know, that he should do, in terms of, he's not the best player, but, you know, goes to his workout, shows up on time, positive with his teammates, you know, takes care of all the little details. And he would never see himself in a leadership position. But I think when going through an exercise like this, it helps with that confidence to say, yeah, that piece, like that consistency piece of taking care of the little details every day, is a huge part about leadership. And when you're doing that, you are actually being a leader, and talking about it and recognizing that with your team or your athletes is really powerful, I think, for some of the kids. The next piece here for me is, I love this quote, found it on social media. I don't know how long ago, but it's in my books, it's in my office. And I have a couple interpretations to it. Leadership is personal, not positional. But I'm curious, love to hear someone's input on how they interpret that quote. And we did this with the kids as well.
I'll step in here as a curling coach, and it's been identified on numerous teams that you have a chosen leader who is the skip, but there's also a natural leader on the team. And that's somebody who comes with the skill set that you say, and they may lead by example, they may lead by taking charge of things, but you always have to be aware on a team, particularly, that you can have a chosen leader who could be a captain, could be your best player, but there's also the natural leaders on that team, and you have to make room for them and make sure that they understand what their role is on and off, and vice versa.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's interesting because in your sport, you definitely, like football, I guess, too, you have like a quarterback, a skip that's automatically seen as that, and they may not be your best leader per se.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. The personal part for me is the person, like who is that person, and leading themselves. So it's personal to you if you're doing all those things, leading themselves, not necessarily positional. And that goes for whether you play a very like important, say, position on a team, or you may not, whether you're starting or not starting, or playing or not playing. It's not positional. It's who you are and how you carry yourself. There's another interpretation for me, and I'm just reading in the chat there. So just because you have a title does not mean you're a leader. Absolutely. So just because, you know, you could be the greatest coach or player in the world, but if you're paired up with, you know, maybe it's a new athlete or a new colleague, and they don't know you and you don't know them, and you know that you have to build that trust. Okay, it doesn't matter what your background is. So before they can really accept, you know, some feedback and get that impact or influence them to be better. Lance said everyone's response to stimuli different, and there's not one way or fixed action to lead. Yeah, there's definitely, well, we saw it earlier, there's so many different ways you can lead, whether it's you know, being positive or being consistent or whatever that is. Everybody has the opportunity to do that. And then Amanda has personal, sometimes leads by example without their title, in their own unique way. So for sure, you don't have to have to, like you said, be the best player. So I think even talking about this particular quote with them is interesting. Another interpretation for me, when leadership is personal, is a relationship between me and you. So just making that connect, or finding that thread between yourself and your athlete, or athlete to athlete, does help. Obviously quite a bit when you can break down some things, and then you start to build that trust to have, I got your back, you got my back. So when I look at you and say, you know what, we need to be better, or we need to be better in this way, that it's not that kid that sort of steps back and goes, oh, I didn't like that. It's like, yeah, okay, you're right, I trust you. You're leading yourself, and we have this connection, and now, yeah, I'm going to get better. So developing that growth mindset. So that's great. I love that quote. It's a great conversation piece, and again, broadening a perspective on what leadership is. That's important to me. Anyway, so put you to a little bit of work, and you can throw it in the chat here too. So when I first came into Dow, we had a couple captains, on-field captains, and that was it, because it was traditional for me. I really had no idea if we talk about leadership teams or leadership groups, or and I had a couple great kids. They were super hard workers and did all the things you asked them to do, but they really lacked a skill set. And we talked about earlier on taking initiative and holding people to account. And I was, taken aback by that. And there was also some other things in the, in the team environment where I felt like I was doing a lot, or my staff was doing a lot, and taking away from the time that you could actually focus on some of the actual coaching and impacting and influencing the athletes. So for me, I came up with our staff some ideas within our team environment to build leadership skills, and to build not just 2 or 3 kids, but to build, we have right now a leadership group about 6 to 8 people, and deliberately, having some sessions with them and building within our team environment opportunities for them to lead. So I'm curious to find out inside your teams, or with your athletes, what are some opportunities inside your environment where you can give your kids that chance to lead? I'll share some of mine in the chat too.
Cindy, I do that with my teams now too. I do like the leadership groups, and
Yeah.
With my U16 team, obviously they're a bit younger than like your university age athletes, but I can't remember what we labeled them. We did 4 different groups, and one of them is just like decorating the dressing room and like providing like that cool team environment.
Yep.
But then we also have our on ice captains, and then we have culture. So like back to that accountability piece, like I hate to say the word, but like calling out athletes or teammates when they aren't acting in accordance with our values. So yeah, I love that. I think that was the last talk that I went to with you, and I've been implementing it since. Yeah,
that's great, Christy. I mean, I think if you can create an environment and introduce that and get that group that fits in there, that you can really take some work off you actually, and when they start to lead themselves and do that for each other, then you can really gain a super strength in the group that has nothing to do with it might have everything to do with the performance for sure, but not in the immediate, which is great. Anybody else have any ones to share? I've seen some in the chat. So 1 swimmer per lane, make sure everybody knows the drill or set. Yeah, so love that. So putting it right in your practices or your training. We do some pretty cool things in soccer as well with that. And Danielle has here. I know Danielle and I work together quite a bit with our Rex environment, but session responsibilities, community, social media, mental skills, nutrition. And along with that, so again, Donna has different swimmers to be relay team captains, and sometimes allow the leader to evolve. One of the participants yesterday was a rugby coach, and she had some high school kids, and she would have positional captains or leaders. So when a grade 12 was a certain position, and when a grade 10 came in and played the same position, that, she was the captain of that particular position, which I thought was really cool. That they would communicate, this is how we do things here. This is how we want to react to this situation. And so she just had little pods of leaders all through the team, which was very deliberate in the way she did it, and I thought it was a great idea. One of the things we do in soccer, and started, and actually, you know, quite personally, when probably 5 or 6 years ago, before I went to Dal and was on my 4th Canada Games coaching cycle, I was very seriously considering getting out of coaching because it's exhausting. But one of the philosophies inside our regional centers, so just that stepping stone to youth national teams here, was a more collaborative effort in coaching. So it wasn't just, you know, the head coach. It was all staff took a role, whether it was 20 minutes here or there, in terms of the session. But one of the things we did was when we play a game or competition within the practice, we started to, okay, well, you know, you're done the 10 minutes, so get together with your team, take a minute and debrief on how that went. And at first, when we started to do it, I was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to go. This is going to go. Because basically you get a bunch of 14 and 15-year-olds talking about, you know, how the last 10 minutes went when maybe they lost 3-0 or whatever. And, you know, I was thinking, well, they're going to have no idea, or they're not going to speak up. And at first, that's exactly what happened. So they were, you know, scared to speak up, scared to step forward. They waited for the coach to come over and give them the ideas. And it took them and the coaching staff a while to get used to it. But also, I think taking that time, because coaches want to go. But, you know, taking those 2 minutes in between, you know, whatever that your game or competition looks like, and doing that debrief. So now, I mean, I do it at Dal all the time. When I first started there, it was new to them. Now I don't hardly have to say anything. I'll just, you know, okay, you know, we're going to switch, take a couple minutes, and sometimes I don't have to go over. Like they solve it themselves, that's the ultimate, that they can do it themselves, and you get a real idea of who really understands the tactics of what you're trying to do. And sometimes it's the quietest kids and not the best player that understand the game the most. So that's one we use, and definitely very powerful. Yeah, I like that, Kirsty, named groups: competition on ice, culture, chemistry. Yeah, the C's. That's very good. So ideas within your program for sure. And you can do it, just like I said, within training, and the swimming coaches there within their training, implement those things. It takes it off you, and they'll go towards it. So once you've identified those opportunities within your team, of course, then you have to identify people within your team that can do that. And to AJ's point, not necessarily your like leader by position, but could be that natural leader. So, you know, we're in a transition phase, obviously, going from one season to the next, and new kids are now seniors, and new kids coming in. So we're in the process of identifying, you know, like 6 to 8 kids and figuring out what do they do really well. And when we do bring them together, it is helping them understand that if you do what you do really well, you're adding to us. You're adding value to us, because really there's 3 things. You're either adding, you're maintaining, or you're taking away. And we want to encourage them to add without, you know, putting too much, say, pressure on them to be someone they're not. So if I'm, you know, in charge of community or culture, and I'm really good at, you know, organizing those things, and yeah, do that and do it really well. Oh, I don't want to be the person that, you know, holds people to account or runs the warm up. Well, that's okay. That's not for you. That's not your strength right now or yet, but that's for somebody else. So I think this approach has really helped put people in positions where they feel really strong and let them go for it. And then also takes a lot off you, and they take a lot off each other because they recognize each other's strengths. Along with that, though, so if you're going to be really deliberate, you do have to, so you're having those community or culture, or, you know, those kids are going to be in the lead. You do have to have some structure, or else you're going to learn the hard way. I think if you have them do a team, you know, bonding activity, and you look at that activity and go, ooh, that's not sort of within the parameters of what I was thinking. So when you identify that group and You have to have some non-negotiables within that as well. So whatever the team bonding activity is, it, where is it? Is it inclusive? And is there a cost to it? Does it bring out the best in others? There's so many things to think about when you think about those things. If it's a performance type of captain, whether they're in in training, what are your expectations? What do we look like in warm up? What do we look like when we train? And maybe going through that exercise, just like you did with the leadership one, like how, what does this look like? What does a great training session look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And getting them really to pinpoint those things. And if you're asking them to be a leader in those things, first of all, they have to be doing it themselves. And second of all, they have to know what they're looking for, and don't hide it from anybody else. This is what we're about. So everybody's clear. And I think once you have that structure in place, you can give it to them. And then that's why I say that sort of creativity, let them come up with those things and be them, let go of the reins per se, and let them be in the lead. Because that's where they learn. I don't know if anybody has anything to add on that before I go to the next slide, but happy to hear if anybody has any thoughts so far. All right. Okay. So next one, this is sort of getting near the last. So once you have your talked about, you're leading yourself and it's personal, not positional. So just like globalizing, having them understand that it's bigger than just, the best or the loudest. When you talk about leadership, and then identifying those kids and finding some roles for them within your team on what can they do. I'll challenge you now, because I have to do it too, is schedule, like, if wherever you are with your team, your athletes right now, what does it look like in terms of leadership? Is there an opportunity for you, especially the people that are here in HRM that are in a bit of a lockdown or anywhere else, that can I connect with them in the next couple of weeks? And what does that look like when I connect with them? What am I going to share with them, and what can they share with me? So I've challenged myself actually over the last 24 hours, because I've been challenging everybody else to schedule in some time and be deliberate with my leadership group and trying to help them out and help them through this phase, but also into the next phase in planning. The next piece for me is, if you're going to allow them to do all these things, so you have this all set up and you're going to say, okay, here we go, your culture, your community, you're on ice, on field, in pool, whatever that looks like for you, then you have to reconnect with them. And sometimes that happens informally. So whether it's, on the deck, in the locker room, or whatever, that you're like, oh, how are things going? Or, I really, like that, or that seems to be going well. You can have those informal connects, but I think formality around a reflection, whether it's meeting, bi-weekly or monthly, depending on what it looks like in the reality with your athletes, to give those leaders time to think about what it is they're doing, how it's going, some of the challenges they might be having, so that they can chat with you a little bit about it. I know we have coaches in our department, and I myself will, take them away from the training ground, whether it's like a barbecue or lunch or whatever, or a fun activity. It makes them feel special, for one, and they're definitely part of it. But it also gives you some deliberate time, whether an hour or so, to talk about some of the challenges of leadership and some of the great things that are happening. And one of the things I know that we're all guilty of is trying to jump in and fix it right away. And being okay with it being a bit messy when they're in charge of some things, and celebrating some of the great stuff with them, but also allowing them the time to answer your questions. So how do you feel? What is it? What are the challenges? What's going well? And if there are some challenges, what are some solutions that you could use? And there's going to be times for sure they're going to need some answers from you, but a lot of times in the discussion with each other, when they have that open forum, that they'll come up with it on their own. And it gives them that permission to sometimes even have tough conversations, because they know all their peers are like, yeah, you heard this too. So, gives them strength to do it on their own. Yeah, so the reflection piece is big. And last one here for me is, if you get through all that, and you know that one of the questions I always ask is, how do I know I'm having an impact on them? It's an interesting question to ask, because sometimes you may not know, but it takes place when we reflect on what applies to us. So that reflection piece with them for themselves, and then you with them as they go through this process, helps you understand where they are and if they are in fact learning and getting better. So that is a conclusion for me. If anybody has any questions or things to add, I'll stay on for a little bit. Love to take that in. I know it's a nice day for everybody too.
Great. Thank you so much, Cindy. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, please speak up or put it in the chat box.
I have a question just around, Cindy, if you've had some experience or one thing I find just trying to get your leaders even to, say, like, bring things to you, or, you know what I mean? If they're representing the group, getting them to try to think about how do they bring that forward, to pull that out of them a little bit, so that, there may be people that identify some speed bumps or some roadblocks before maybe the coach or the staff does. I don't know if you have any, if that makes sense, or any kind of thoughts on that.
For sure. We had the session before. So someone does some online feedback forms. They do it online, and just getting their perception on like whatever the session was, or they do it after every session, but it could be after the week, and really quick little checklist on, how you think things are going. And so you get some immediate feedback from the whole group. And I think so I thought that was pretty interesting. I was like, oh, wow, that's a lot. And if you're looking at it and going, there's no surprises here, then you're in good shape, because you're like, okay, that's what I see too. But I think what you're moving towards is things that they pick up on before you do. And I think giving them that space, Kevin, like, maybe it's once a week meeting to say, look, when there's tough stuff, I don't want you to avoid it, because that's what I think sometimes we try to do. And because it's a difficult conversation that way, but I want you to bring it to me in a thoughtful manner. And I think asking the appropriate questions of them so that they can answer those and bring those to you is important. I don't know if that helps you, but I know some online feedback for another group helped. Reflection questions, 3 questions. Getting that feedback. That's how I do right now, the last couple of years, when we come into meetings, whether it's a leadership group or with an athlete, I give them a form with a bunch of questions on it. They have to have it back to me, and they lead the discussion. So because they're the ones that have answered the questions and written it down, and that has definitely helped alleviate a lot for me. I find out most of the stuff I know already, and then I find out stuff that I may have missed. It's a long answer.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Hey, Cindy, I have one question, if that's okay.
Yeah. Hey, Dee.
Hey, I'm curious, with your leadership group, is that something that you would put out to the team that's kind of voluntary, like anyone who wanted to take part, or is it kind of more strategic on your end of, identifying people, or?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dee. We went through with my staff sort of philosophical back and forth on how, because it was a new step for us, being completely vulnerable, you'd be asking for people to come in, but we were selective. So we did select that. And then as we got to know some of the younger players as they came through, or saw how people were reacting to, whatever situation was happening. And I know COVID is, I'm sure for a lot of people popped out in my group that I never would have expected, just with their resiliency and their ability to handle adversity. And I was just like, wow, learned a lot about them. So I think identifying that core group where you have that trust with them, because you need to have that trust, and then observing and watching. And then it could be a time like partway through a season or whatever, where you say, you know what, to a young kid, hey, I want you to come in on this meeting, or I want you to hear some of this, and introducing them that way. Because I do believe there's still a definite trust piece, because ultimately you're in charge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
huge. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Any last questions?
Before you get some vitamin D.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess we'll wrap it up there a little early, but thank you so much, Cindy. And